What is going on, people? Joey Tongs Boxing, and I want to break down my current top 5 pound-for-pound fighters list. I want to do this after I just thought of it now, but I think it's good to do it after the Inoue Fulton fight and the Crawford Spence fight. So I wanted to wait till after the Inoue Fulton and Crawford Spence fight so I could have a real educated analysis of it. So for me, this is the top 5 pound-for-pound currently, right now, July 31st, 2023. It's my list. What I use to go off my list is generally I'm using resume and accomplishments. That's what I factor in first. Then I go off how you dominated your opposition, and then I go off eye test and ability, and then I go to hypothetical head-to-head matchups. Now, I know everyone has their own pound-for-pound list, and it's very subjective, so as long as people are bringing good points, I'm okay with it. I just think there's a lot of bias in the way certain people speak about it. So I'm going to start from 1 and then go to 5. I'm not going to do a full top 10, but I'm going to go 1 through 5 right now. Number 1 for me is Terence Crawford. I think Crawford is the most talented fighter in the sport. I think from an accomplishment standpoint, he's undisputed now at welterweight. So you can't say he lacks the accomplishment because that was the thing for a long time. He dominated another fighter that most people regarded in the top 5 in the pound-for-pound list. And if not in the top 5, certainly in the top 10 was Errol Spence. So I think that he's got to be 1. Complete domination, best switch hitter, probably in boxing history, tremendous finisher, power puncher, counter puncher, physically strong, great speed, great footwork, great ring IQ. The guy can do it all, and he dominated Spence so much. It was the equivalent of, I don't know how many people here are NBA fans, of an NBA basketball player scoring 65 points in an NBA Finals game. It was that dominant. He's number 1 for me. But my number 2, I think, could be debated as 1. I go 1 Crawford, but number 2 for me is Naoya Inoue. He also dominated Stephen Fulton in tremendous fashion, tremendous explosiveness, tremendous power, body punching, finishing ability as well as Crawford. Good defense as well. But, I mean, I think he's phenomenal. Naoya Inoue, definitely worthy of being number 2. 4-division champion. Crawford only has 3. He's not undisputed, but was undisputed as previous weight class, 118. Now 122, he's got 2 belts. If he wins the next fight, which they said they're going to do versus Marlon Tabalas, he will go to undisputed in 2 weight classes like Crawford is. So they're really like going back and forth with like, I could do this better. No, I could do that better. You know, he dominates Fulton in a way. Then Crawford's like, I'm going to dominate Spence. So I think even though Inoue has the 4 weight classes and Crawford has the 3, I look at who you beat, not just how many weight classes. And I think Crawford dominating Spence is a much better win than any of Inoue's opponents. Even though Fulton is really, really good, Donaire is really, really good, but it was a 39-year-old Donaire. Naravis is really good, but I think that Spence, that win is significantly ahead. I think Crawford also is probably a little bit more well-rounded in skill and has a little bit of a better ring IQ. But if someone was to say to me Inoue is number 1, I would have no problem with that. I just think Inoue doesn't have a win as good as Spence, and Crawford's been champion for longer, I believe. And Crawford's knocked out every single opponent he's fought in the last 7 years. Inoue I don't want to say, he struggled somewhat. He broke his orbital bone versus Donaire, showed his heart. But Donaire, he was 39 years old and stuff. Crawford's never really, struggled. But one thing I like about those two is that they've never been in a close fight where it could have gone either way. Like, it's been very clear that these guys are dominating people. Crawford got dropped by Kavliauskas, but he knocked him out, in round 8 or 9. It was domination. In a way, I don't think he's ever been knocked down. So it's debatable. If someone went one way or the other way, I wouldn't get mad at it. But for me, I go with Terence Crawford 1, Naoya Inoue 2. Number 3 for me is Alexander Usyk, former undisputed cruiserweight champion. Currently holds 3 titles at heavyweight, IBF, the WBA, and the WBO. Dominated the cruiserweight division. Took all the belts from Breda, Dorticos, Michael Hunter was the guy he fought, Tony Bellew, Gassiev. Then he goes to heavyweight, beats Chisora. He beat Chaz Witherspoon, then he beat Chisora, and then beat Anthony Joshua twice. Clearly, in my opinion, I don't know what that split decision was, Glenn Feldman, but he's great. Doesn't have the mega domination the way that Crawford and Inoue do, but beating Joshua is no small feat. He beat him twice. And if he were to defeat Tyson Fury, I think you could make a case that he might even be number one. I mean, he's that good. But I don't think he's dominating his opponents as well as those guys are. But he's great. So, he's definitely worthy of consideration for number one. I think those are clearly the top three right now. Those are the three guys that are just dominating the most. And if you had them in any order, I wouldn't hate it. But for me, it's Crawford, Inoue, and then Usyk. For me, number four, this is where it gets interesting because I think there's a big gap after the first 3 and 4. I'm going to say Canelo Alvarez. And I know a lot of people are going to say, how could you say that? He's still undisputed at super middleweight. He's still dominated in his last fight, pretty much. I mean, he knocked down Ryder and won almost every single round. Basically dominated an old shot Triple G, but still he did it. And people say like all the way shot, but Triple G has still come off beating Murata at the 160-pound division. Since losing to Bivol, he's definitely looked worse. Really since the Caleb Plant fight, you could argue. I think Canelo was regarded as number one by most people, myself included, in that 2019-20 era when he was cleaning out everybody, dominating Danny Jacobs, Kovalov, Billy Joe Saunders, Callum Smith, Abney Yildirim, dominating them. He then started to slow down a little bit. The Bivol fight, obviously, he lost it. And since the Bivol fight, he hasn't really looked as dominant as he did prior. And now he's fighting against the guy, Jermell Charlo, who's 2 weight classes lower. So, to me, if he was all about his legacy and he was going to fight the best opposition, how could you not rematch Bivol? And if you were to rematch Bivol and beat Bivol convincingly, I would seriously consider putting him number one on the pound-for-pound list. I would, even with the loss to Bivol, because I'm not the kind of guy that, takes away if you lose a fight, you can't come back. I don't believe in that. And a lot of people might think that based on my list because the top 3 on my list are all undefeated, but I'm not saying that. You don't have to be undefeated. You could just be that good where you avenge a loss. There's nothing wrong with that. Sugar Ray Leonard lost to Roberto Duran. He avenged his loss, and he was number one. A lot of guys have had losses and been the number one guy. Marvin Hagler, Bernard Hopkins had losses. He was on the pound-for-pound list for years, number one for a little bit. A guy like Manny Pacquiao, he had losses. He was number one. So I don't think that a loss is the worst thing for you. And now my number 5, this gets interesting for me. And I'm going to say one that surprises some people. I had to think about this, but for me, number 5 is Vasily Lomachenko. And people say, how could you say that? Let's rewind. Lomachenko, fastest 3-division champion ever. The first loss he had versus Orlando Salido was in his second pro fight, but it was pretty tight. I thought it was a draw, but he could have had a loss. Okay, he wasn't ready for the pro ranks. He then goes on a run of dominating all these very good fighters, one after another. Gary Russell, Walters. Then he beats these other contenders. Gamaliel Rodriguez, mandatory fights. Who else did he fight? I'm trying to remember at 130. He was it was Walters, Sosa, Mariaga at 126. The Rigondeaux fight, okay, that was a weight, guy much smaller. I'm not really so into that one. Campbell, Linares, when Linares had something, he knocked him out. And Linares actually dropped Lomachenko. Lost to Teofimo Lopez. That's a legitimate, loss. And that's his, main loss, for the big fight that he lost. He got started too late. Maybe the moment was too big. And that's one thing which I like about Inoue and Crawford and Usyk. They've always rose to the occasion. Lomachenko, you can't say that necessarily all the time. But then he comes back and beats Comey up, beats Nakatani. Nakatani then Comey. Has a not great showing versus Jermaine Ortiz, but I think he still won the fight pretty clearly. It was close. He underperformed, but I think definitely won it. And then, in my opinion, got robbed versus Devin Haney. I thought he really won that fight. I know it was competitive, but I thought he won it. If he would have gotten that win, he would have been the undisputed lightweight champion, beating a young, undefeated guy who's a really good fighter, Devin Haney. So, to me, he's number 5 on my list. I debated him and Canelo, but I think that Lomachenko hasn't looked as dominant in recent fights, even though I thought he beat Haney. But it's close. He's also been inactive a little bit more. So I think you go either way on that. But for me, that's my top 5. I'm not going to do a full top 10, but other guys that I think warrant consideration, Dimitri Bivol, Teofimo Lopez, and Artur Beterbiev. I think those guys as well deserve some consideration for this list. But let me know what you guys think. What is your top 5? 1, for me, Crawford. 2, Inoue. 3, Usyk. 4, Canelo Alvarez. And 5, Lomachenko. Let me know what you guys think. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Peace.